My parents laughed at my black husband when I said he was special forces and called him a fake hero. I said nothing until he walked in and the room froze. I'm O'Dellin, and this is the story of how my parents looked me in the face and laughed. Not just at me, but at the man I married because he was black, because they didn't believe someone like him could be special forces. But what hurt more wasn't their ignorance. It was knowing they wanted it to be true, that they needed him to be a fraud just so they could keep feeling superior. But then, he walked in, and everything they built on mockery started to crack. I hadn't been back to my parents' house in over a year, not since the last birthday party where Seraphine made a toast that felt more like a roast. So when Mom called the night before to invite me to brunch, last minute, casual, like I was an afterthought, I hesitated. Just some bagels and fruit, family only, she said, if you're free. If I was free, it was a Sunday. She knew I didn't work Sundays. She'd known that for years, but I smiled through the phone and told her, sure, we'll be there. Darnell looked at me from across the kitchen, arms crossed, coffee cooling in his hands. You sure? Oh? I don't mind staying home. We could go hiking or see that jazz trio you like. I shook my head. I need to show them that I'm still trying. He didn't answer right away, just walked over, kissed my temple, and whispered, I got you. Always. That was Darnell. Quiet power. Steady warmth. He'd seen the bruises my family left behind. Not physical ones, but the kind you wear in your silence. We drove through the blooming cherry-lined streets of our Virginia neighborhood. I caught myself fiddling with the sleeve of my cardigan, a nervous tic from childhood. By the time we pulled into the driveway, the knot in my chest was back, tight, familiar. Mom greeted us at the door. Lipstick too red, smile too wide. Oh, there you are, she chirped like we were guests at a hotel, not her daughter and son-in-law. Come in. Come in. Shoes off, please. You know how Seraphine is about the floors, right, Seraphine? She appeared behind Mom like a perfectly filtered Instagram story. Pressed dress, hair curled just enough to look undone. She leaned in to hug me quickly, then turned to Darnell. Wow, she said, eyes sweeping over him. So this is the man in uniform. You clean up well. Darnell smiled politely. Nice to see you too. I thought the army was less of a thing now, she continued, looping her arm through mine. Kids just go to college these days, don't they? I didn't answer. My jaw tightened. Inside, the table was already full. Cousins, uncles, Seraphim's friends, who always seemed to orbit around her like satellites. Darnell looked around for a chair. There wasn't one. Oh, Mom said, feigning surprise. Must have miscounted. There's a folding chair in the corner. He pulled it over and sat without a word. I wanted to say something, but I'd learned long ago that silence was survival here. Just as we began passing plates, Seraphine clinked her mimosa glass. Hope you don't mind eating like in the field, Darnell, she joked. A few chuckles, even from Dad. Darnell smiled again. Cool. Measured. He was used to discomfort. Combat zones taught him that. But this was different. This was a room full of people who shared my blood pretending he didn't belong. Then came the moment that made the air shift. So, Dad began, scooping eggs onto his plate. What do you do these days, Darnell? Since you're retired from the what was it again? Special Forces, I said before Darnell could answer. A slow chuckle rippled around the table. Like I'd said, he was a magician. Wineglass lifted. Mom didn't miss her cue. Special Forces? Sweetie, anyone can say that. Prove it. I blinked. Excuse me. She shrugged, playful but sharp. I mean, how do we even know? People exaggerate on resumes all the time. My heart pounded in my ears. I looked at my sister. Nothing. No defense. Just her stirring her mimosa like it was all beneath her attention. He doesn't need to prove anything, I said, my voice calm but cutting. Not to you. The room quieted, awkward and brittle. No one spoke, not even Darnell. After brunch, we got in the car. The drive home was quiet. Outside the window, spring looked beautiful, green and pink blooming in defiance of the cold that had just passed. I wanted to cry, but tears felt too easy. Instead, I opened my phone. I wasn't looking at family photos. I wasn't reading texts. I was looking at something else, something I'd been building, a record, receipts, proof. They don't see what I see, I whispered. But they will. And that's when I saw it. What Seraphine posted while we were still at the table. It was the kind of post you don't expect from your own sister, at least not when you're still chewing your brunch potatoes. There it was, a selfie. Seraphine smirking, angled just enough to show the brunch spread behind her and the empty chair where Darnell had sat. The caption, Sunday with the Soldier Boy make-believe medals, family first. I stared at the screen, the heat rushing up my neck. There were already a dozen likes, a few laughing emojis, and the comments, Aunt Loretta, he's sweet though. Probably works security now. Cousin Blake, y'all are wild lol. And, of course, Seraphine replying beneath it all, we just keeping it light, fam. Y'all know how it is. How it is. I sat still for a long moment, phone frozen in my palm. The ceiling fan above our living room spun lazily, and outside the window, the sun was already beginning to dip, casting amber streaks across the wooden floor. From the kitchen, I heard the soft clink of a glass and running water. Darnell was rinsing his cup. He walked past me without a word, opened the sliding door, and stepped onto the porch. No sound, no confrontation. That was him. He didn't need to explode. Silence for Darnell meant he'd already done the math and accepted the sum. I followed a few minutes later, barefoot, arms folded. He stood with his back to me watching the sky shift. I didn't say anything. I knew better than to ask if he was okay. I knew the answer. Instead, I turned around, went back inside, sat at the dining table, and opened my laptop. For a moment, I just stared at the blank document. Then I began typing. Date, time, screenshot, caption, comments. I wasn't just saving it, I was recording it. I'd done this before. Once, years ago, after Sarah Finn forgot to send us the Thanksgiving invite and later claimed we'd decided not to come. I'd archived her email, the one with the guest list, the one that didn't include our names. I'd kept that one. I kept this one too because I was done letting them rewrite my reality. The scrolling stopped when I came across another memory. Graduation, my RN pinning ceremony. My parents had RSVP'd, even told me they were so proud, but they didn't show. Said there was a mix-up, a flat tire. I'd stood outside that auditorium in heels that blistered, holding my diploma with a forced smile while everyone else took pictures with family. Then another one, the time Sarah Finn interrupted my birthday dinner at the restaurant just to announce her PR firm's rebrand. My parents clapped like it was her party. How many little slices had they taken from me over the years? How many moments I swallowed just to keep peace? I shut the laptop slowly, then picked up my phone again. I stared at her post. My thumb hovered over the comment box. I could have written 100 things, but in the end, I typed just one sentence. That was low. I'll remember this. I hit send. The reply came back within seconds. I'm just keeping it real. You wanted to play house with a fantasy? Own it. Playhouse? Fantasy? I closed the app before I could react. My hand trembled a little. Not from fear, from restraint. I stood, walked to the printer, and hit print. The screenshot came out, crisp and clear. I took it, found a thumbtack, and pinned it to the corkboard in my home office just above my desk. It sat next to the Thanksgiving guest list, next to the RSVP email from graduation. Proof. If they want to challenge who he is, I murmured to myself, then they'll learn who I am. I didn't mean it as a threat, I meant it as a promise. Later that night, I checked on Darnell. He was in the garage tuning his bike, something he did when he didn't want to think. I left him alone. Instead, I pulled out a notebook from the bottom drawer of my nightstand. It was leather-bound, soft from use. I'd started it the first year we got married. At the time, it was filled with recipes I wanted to try, home projects, plans. Now it would hold something else. I opened to a fresh page. At the top, I wrote, "The line is drawn." And beneath that, just one word. Enough. The next morning I made a call to someone they'd never dare mock. The line disconnected with a clean click. I sat back, letting the morning silence of the house wrap around me. The coffee on the table had gone cold, untouched. Darnell was already gone. He'd left early for his check-in at Fort Belvoir, said he had paperwork to complete for the school counseling certification board, but I suspected he needed the familiar rhythms of base life today. After what Seraphin posted, even silence must have felt safer than this house. I didn't tell him where I was going. By 8:40 a.m., I was already on the road, heading north. The drive to Fort Belvoir took just under an hour, traffic light this early on a Monday. The sky was overcast, a flat gray that made the trees blur together along the median. When I pulled up to the gate, I handed over my temporary visitor pass and ID, trying not to look nervous. The guard scanned them both, eyed the military decal on my windshield, and nodded once. "You're clear, ma'am. Welcome." The word hit strange. Welcome. I hadn't felt that in a while. Inside the main administrative building, the air was cooler, sharper, military efficient. I stepped up to the reception desk and asked, "I'm here to see Lieutenant Colonel Amari Keene. I'm Darnell's wife, Odellen." The receptionist, a young woman with crisp braids and an unreadable face, tapped a few keys on her screen, then picked up the phone. 2 minutes later, a door swung open at the end of the corridor and out stepped a tall, athletic woman in pressed fatigues and steel-gray eyes. "Mrs. Fields," she said, extending a hand. "Come with me." I followed her into a compact office with military commendations lining the walls. She offered no small talk, just sat down behind her desk, motioned to the seat across. "I take it this is about the recent family drama," she said, a corner of her mouth twitching upward. I froze, surprised. She gave a small nod toward her desktop monitor. "Yes, your sister's post found its way around base. Soldiers have family too. They talk." "I didn't come to cause trouble," I said softly, "but I needed to know for myself." She studied me a moment longer, then tapped her keyboard. "Then let me show you something." She turned the monitor toward me. On screen was a personnel file. Full name, Darnell Fields, and below it, titles and codes I didn't fully understand. But I recognized some things. Silver Star, Joint Special Operations, Operation Iron Echo, clearance level, active reserve. Lieutenant Colonel Keene leaned back. "Your husband didn't just serve. He led 2 high-risk operations, both classified for years. He still consulted on reserve intelligence. That post your sister made, it wasn't just disrespectful. It was reckless." I swallowed hard. "He never told me all of that. He's not the kind of man who brags, Mrs. Fields. He lets actions speak." But maybe it's time someone else did the talking for him. I drove home slower than I came. Rain had started, soft at first, then harder, making the wipers thump against the windshield in rhythm. My thoughts ran ahead of the road, skipping through years of quiet humiliations. Graduation, Thanksgiving. That dinner where Mom leaned close and said loud enough for others to hear, "You know, Odellen, Not everyone can marry up. No one said a word. Not even Serafini. I walked into the house soaked through, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the printer. The file I'd emailed myself was there. Darnell's profile, the official one, complete with commendations. I slid it into an envelope along with a copy of Seraphine's post. Across the front, I scrawled to whom it clearly concerns, but I didn't send it. Not yet. That night, we sat at the kitchen table over chamomile tea. Darnell didn't ask about my day. He just passed me the honey and said, "You're quieter than usual." I looked at him for a long beat. "You didn't think I needed to know about the Silver Star?" He smiled faintly. "You knew who I was when I sat at that brunch table without a seat. I didn't need to remind you." I reached over, took his hand. "Well," I said, "they're about to find out who I am." He tilted his head, curious. I leaned back, voice steady. And the first place I chose to begin was Seraphine's wedding rehearsal dinner. The invitation had no RSVP card for me. It had been a group email sent to family buried between registry links and pastel dress codes. I showed up anyway, 3 days before the wedding. Thursday evening, sun setting over rows of grapevines in Maryland, and the main house of the vineyard lit up like something out of a wedding magazine. I arrived alone, pulled up in my own car. Darnell offered to come, but I told him no. This part wasn't about him anymore. It was about me. The valet didn't even look twice at me, just took my keys and handed over the little numbered tag. The guests, all dressed in soft blush and beige, moved like coordinated dancers toward the patio where string lights hovered overhead. I walked slow, heels on gravel, letting their whispers rise around me. "Is that Odellin? She came alone? Did they even invite her?" Serafini was near the fountain, beaming in white, surrounded by her bridal party and champagne satin. She caught my eye for half a second, then looked away like I was the server with a tray of mini crab cakes. Our mother was at the bar speaking low to someone from church, and when she turned and saw me, her jaw tensed. But she didn't come over. I didn't need a welcome. I made my way toward a table at the edge of the action and sat down, crossed my legs, smoothed the fabric of my skirt. The envelope was tucked inside my clutch. I didn't touch it yet. Let them play their parts. The rehearsal dinner unfolded like a show. Synchronized, scripted, smug. My father clinked his glass with a butter knife and stood. "I'd like to say a few words," he said as servers began pouring the wine. "Serafini," he beamed, "has always known what she wanted. She's strategic, brilliant, and has impeccable taste. And now she's found herself a real man." People chuckled. He kept going. "A man with credentials, a man with a future, a man who didn't need to embellish anything to be respected." It was a subtle dig, but not for me, for Darnell, and everyone at that table knew it. One of the groomsmen gave a tight laugh and muttered, "Ouch," into his napkin. Our mother sipped her Chardonnay like it was applause. I stood. I didn't raise my voice, didn't clear my throat or wait for attention. I simply walked, heels sharp against the stone patio, up to the head table and placed the small envelope directly in front of Serafini's perfect plate. "You forgot to fact-check," I said. She blinked, laughed nervously. The room stilled. "In case anyone's curious," I continued, "that fantasy of a husband you mocked, he's decorated, verified, and still trusted by agencies none of you even know exist." I stepped back. "Next time you use me as the punchline to make yourself look taller, make sure you know how high the floor really is." No one moved. No one spoke. I turned and walked back down the stone path past the stunned silence, past the low of embarrassment. No one followed me, at least not until I reached the parking lot. "You embarrassed your sister," came a sharp voice behind me. It was my mother, heels crunching fast on the gravel. I didn't turn. "She's 3 days from her wedding, Odellin, and you decided to what? Air your insecurities in front of her guests?" I did face her then. "She embarrassed herself," I said quietly, "the moment she turned my husband into her personal roast. That post wasn't cute. That toast wasn't harmless, and you stood there and smiled. She's under pressure. Weddings are stressful. Being humiliated by family is stressful too, but no one's throwing me a spa day." She narrowed her eyes. "You always were dramatic." "No," I replied, stepping closer. "I've just stopped pretending this is love." I got in my car, shut the door, and let the air conditioning hit my face like a reset button. The tears didn't come. Not because I didn't hurt, but because for once, the hurt had a direction, a shape, and it didn't shrink me. When I got home, Darnell was on the porch swing with a glass of iced tea. He looked up, gave me a long knowing look. "You didn't need me to fight for you," he said. I leaned down, kissed his temple. "No," I said, "but I needed them to remember I wasn't who they said I was." He nodded once. "They'll remember now." And then came the wedding day, the day everything unraveled. The morning of Seraphine's wedding bloomed like a lie. Warm breeze, crystal blue skies, rows of vines swaying just right, the kind of day planners dream about, the kind of day my mother would say was meant for perfection. But I knew better. I'd seen too much behind their curtain to believe in show days like this. I arrived just before the ceremony, alone again. Darnell had offered gently, but I told him it would be better if I faced this part by myself, not out of pride, but because some battles weren't meant to be shared. The ushers greeted guests with sparkling water and sunscreen towelettes. When I gave my name, one of them hesitated before pointing me toward the far left row, near a pillar, directly in the sun. No canopy, no fan, just a folding chair baking on the gravel. I glanced toward the family section shaded under elegant cream umbrellas. Empty seats sat beside my mother. She saw me, looked straight at me, then turned to whisper something to her church friend. I didn't flinch. I walked to my assigned seat and sat. A little boy with a clip-on bow tie turned around in the row ahead and looked at me with curiosity. "Aren't you her sister?" he asked. "Why are you sitting way back here?" I gave him a soft smile. "Guess I didn't RSVP fast enough." He blinked, confused, then turned back around. From where I sat, I could just barely see the floral arch where Seraphine now stood, glowing in lace, her groom at her side. Their efficient, a friend from her PR firm, spoke in poetic tones about commitment, honesty, and choosing love in full view of truth. Then, Seraphine began her vows. "I never expected you," she said, voice trembling just enough for effect. "But when you walked into my life, you saw me. You accepted me when even my own family judged me for loving someone strong, someone real." I froze. It was deliberate. Every word, a weapon dipped in sugar. Heads turned subtly toward my row. A few eyebrows raised. I stared straight ahead, expression still. Let her have her performance. But the whisper came next. A bridesmaid, one of Seraphine's oldest friends, leaned toward the girl beside her and murmured just loud enough, "Wonder if the fake soldier's wife brought a gift." They chuckled. I didn't move. Then it happened. The whisper stopped. A few gasps sounded behind me. Movement rippled down the aisle like wind through wheat. "Darnell." He stepped onto the stone path walking slowly, in full dress blues. Not a costume, not a rented suit. The real thing. Polished metals glinting against dark fabric, precision and quiet power in every step. Guests straightened in their seats. Some stood. Even the violinist stilled her bow. He didn't look left or right. He walked up the aisle, past stunned bridesmaids, past Seraphine, who visibly paled, and stopped just short of the altar. Then, calmly, he turned toward the crowd and spoke. "Normally," he said, "I don't interrupt weddings, especially not ones where I wasn't welcome. But my wife deserves better than the seat by the trash bins." Murmurs swept through the crowd. A few guests clapped, hesitantly at first, then louder. One woman even said, "Amen." He turned to me then, just a glance. I stood without a word. I walked past Seraphine, who stood frozen, bouquet clutched tight. As I passed, I leaned in close and said quietly, "Now you have your moment, but I don't envy you for what's next." She didn't respond. Couldn't. I walked with Darnell back down the aisle. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Every step was a boundary redrawn, a truth reestablished. By the time we reached the parking lot, the applause had faded, replaced by confusion and low conversation. But I didn't look back, because what came next, they absolutely didn't see coming. By the time the wedding ended, I thought the last layer of humiliation had peeled off. But life has a strange way of stretching silence into signals. The next morning, while I was sipping my coffee and organizing the last of the screenshots into a folder I labeled Truth for when they act confused, my phone rang. Unknown number. Maryland area code. I picked up, cautious. "Mrs. Broward here," the voice said, crisp, but not unkind. "I believe we saw each other at the ceremony." I was seated near the musicians. I nodded, though she couldn't see me. "We'd like to speak with you privately." "Just you." My first instinct was to say no. That woman barely blinked in my direction yesterday. Why now? Darnell passed by, his second cup of coffee in hand, eyebrow raised at my hesitation. I held up a finger. "May I ask what this is regarding?" I said. There was a brief pause. "Your sister's choices," she said simply, "and our family's name being dragged into a fire we didn't light." I met Darnell's gaze. He gave a slow nod. "All right," I replied. "Where?" The place was discreet. A tucked-away brunch spot that served dishes like poached salmon and lavender French toast, white tablecloths, soft jazz in the background, the kind of place you pick when you don't want to be overheard. Mrs. Broward was already seated when I arrived. Next to her was a man I hadn't met. Gray-haired, sharp suit, posture of someone used to courtroom silence. "My brother," she said, gesturing as I sat. "Judge Raymond Ellis." "O'Dellin," I said quietly. I didn't offer my last name. They didn't waste time. "We've looked into your husband's military record," the judge began. "His credentials are impeccable, which makes the rumors surrounding him all the more unsettling." I folded my hands. "That wasn't us." Mrs. Broward leaned in, her tone cool. "We know. That's why we invited you." I reached into my bag and pulled out the manila folder, slid it across the table. Her hands hesitated just a moment before she took it. Inside, screenshots of emails between Seraphine and our cousin Gina. A draft Reddit post saved as a PDF titled, "My sister's husband lied about being special forces. Ask me how I know." I let them absorb it. The judge flipped through slowly, his jaw tightening with each page. "She was timing this," I said, voice steady, "weeks before the wedding. If it wasn't me calling her out, this would have been leaked by someone else, publicly." He stopped on one email. "She reached out to an Army records verification forum," he muttered. "Twice," I said, "and flagged one of Darnell's LinkedIn posts as stolen valor. We have the server timestamps." Silence stretched across the table. The only sounds were forks clinking softly at neighboring tables. Finally, the judge spoke. "This isn't just petty rivalry," he said. "This is defamation with intent to undermine a military family's integrity. In my circles, that's not brushed off. It's prosecuted." Mrs. Broward folded her hands atop the folder. Her eyes were gentler now, but steel lay just beneath. "I don't believe in family destroying family," she said. But I also don't believe in marrying into madness, and if your sister is willing to lie like this, then my son deserves to know what she's capable of. I didn't flinch. That's your call? She reached over and placed a hand lightly on mine. Tonight, there's a family review dinner. Everyone from both sides is attending. You don't have to say a word, but we'll need these documents submitted officially. I nodded. This wasn't just about a ruined seed or a mocking toast anymore. It had become something deeper, a test of who gets to write the family's version of the truth. As I left the brunch spot, sun high and unrelenting, I didn't look back. My phone buzzed as I stepped into the parking lot. Text from Serafini. Are you seriously still dragging this out? It's over. Oh, get over it. I stared at it for a full minute, then I added it to the folder. Time-stamped. Because what came next, they absolutely didn't see coming. They walked in like it was any other post-wedding family dinner. Smiles too tight, dresses too polished, voices a little too loud. The dining room smelled of roasted lamb and overcompensation. My mother had laid out her best china, and my father opened a bottle of red he only touched when trying to impress guests. But I sat still at the end of the table, where the light barely reached, next to Darnell. No one brought up what happened at the ceremony. Not Serafini's cruel vow, not Darnell's entrance, not the folder that changed everything. It was as if the family had made an unspoken pact to pretend it never happened. But the truth doesn't disappear just because no one says its name. Here's to new beginnings, Serafin said, raising her glass before the appetizers were even cleared. Second chances are a gift. Some people squander them, others rise to the occasion. Her eyes landed on me for a beat too long. A few forced laughs followed. My mother smiled, faint, brittle. Darnell's hand tightened over mine under the table, just once. I didn't flinch. From the opposite end of the table, Judge Ellis set down his glass, cleared his throat, and stood. I wasn't going to say anything tonight, he began. But after everything I've seen and read, I've come to a conclusion. And I didn't come here tonight as a relative. I came as someone who understands how easily words can ruin lives. The room stilled. You may not realize it, but what was done targeting a veteran's record attempting to defame and discredit a man who served this country has legal consequences. Someone dropped a fork. Aunt Clarice muttered, Lord have mercy. Let me be clear, he continued, glancing directly at Serafin. Creating false narratives, initiating anonymous reports, and drafting defamatory content with intent to distribute is not just reckless, it's prosecutable. Serafin froze. My father's jaw went tight. My mother's smile faded. Across from me, Mrs. Broward leaned forward, her voice smooth but firm. If this family had simply told the truth from the beginning, she said, we wouldn't be here discussing legal lines crossed by a bride who thought lies were fashionable. You think I made all this up? Serafin snapped, her voice rising. This is her doing. She pointed at me. She set me up. I didn't move. The judge lifted an envelope and held it in the air. These came from 3 different sources, he said. One is from a neighbor who overheard conversations you had about falsifying accusations. One is from a cousin, your own. And one, yes, is from your sister. But all are consistent. All time-stamped, all pointing to intent. He handed a copy to my mother. She didn't take it. I didn't mean for it to go that far, Serafin said, her voice cracking. It was just a joke. People say things online. You tried to ruin a man's life, Mrs. Broward cut in sharply, for attention. Then came the slow unraveling. Uncle Warren pushed his chair back without a word and walked out. Aunt Clarice stood next, shaking her head. I raised my kids better, she muttered. A cousin followed. Chairs scraped hardwood. The dining room grew quieter with each step toward the door. Serafin looked around the room like someone stranded at sea. Mom, she pleaded, say something. My mother looked at me for the first time that night, and I, still seated, said quietly, this is what silence builds. I stood slowly. Darnell rose with me. I didn't look at Serafin again. I walked past my father, past the untouched roast, past the floral centerpiece that was supposed to make everything look normal. And for the first time in my life, my mother followed me out of the room, quiet, pale, and shaking. We didn't speak a word on the ride home, not a single word. Of the tires on the dark 2-lane road was the only sound between us. Darnell kept both hands steady on the wheel, and I stared out the window, watching the trees blur into shadow. But in my head, I saw her, my mother, standing just behind me as I stepped into the night, her mouth slightly open, her eyes blinking fast like someone trying to process a fire they didn't smell until it was too late. There was no blame in her face. No pride either, just a quiet kind of unraveling, like a person realizing they'd believed a story that never had a solid spine. We got home around 9. I didn't bother changing out of my dress. I went straight to my desk, opened the file folder that held every printout, every screenshot, every typed draft I'd collected since Serafin decided to use my husband's name like a punchline. I added one more page. It was a formal restraining order request, naming Serafin as the respondent, citing harassment, impersonation, and slander. I signed it. Then I printed out a cease and desist letter, attached a copy of the military verification, and addressed the envelope with steady hands. I didn't tell Darnell. He already knew. The next evening, I pulled my hair back into a simple bun and put on a clean navy blouse. Darnell handed me a folder and kissed my forehead before I left. You sure you want to go alone? He asked gently. I think I need to, I said. It was the HOA monthly meeting, held in the rec hall across from the pool. the same space my mother and Seraphine had once used for their baby shower setups and wine-tasting fundraisers. This time, the chairs were arranged in a circle. The air smelled faintly of lemon oil and cautious curiosity. Mrs. Novak, who once told me I smiled a little too tight, stood up first. "I used to think O'Dellon was standoffish," she said, glancing toward me but not waiting for affirmation. "But after what came out this week, I think she was just surviving." Mr. Patel, who lived 3 doors down, nodded solemnly. "I thought she was the angry one," he said. "Turns out she was just quiet." A few neighbors clapped, not loudly, but loud enough. My mother sat stiffly in the front row, her lips pressed into a thin line. Seraphine wasn't present. I had no idea she'd been banned or just too embarrassed to show up. Then Mr. Clark, the chair of the HOA board, stood. In light of recent documentation, testimonies, and ethical complaints submitted by multiple community members, he said, "We're putting to vote the removal of Mrs. Althea Monroe from board leadership." There was no arguing, no outburst, just a simple raising of hands. 10 for removal, 1 abstention. My mother closed her eyes and whispered something I couldn't hear. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I handed in my envelope of evidence, nodded to the board, and left as quietly as I'd come. That night, I set the envelope from the court, already addressed, to be dropped off first thing in the morning. As I placed it on the counter, my phone buzzed once, a missed call from my father. No voicemail, no message, just a silence I'd grown all too used to. I didn't call back. I didn't even hesitate. I deleted it, tucked the phone under the pillow, and sat beside Darnell on the couch. He didn't ask. He just looked at me and nodded, like he'd seen something in my face that told him what he needed to know. And for once, I didn't dream of my family. I dreamed of light and silence. 3 weeks passed. 3 quiet, strangely clean weeks. No unexpected knocks. No family texts. Not even a forwarded meme from my cousin, Lynette, who used to flood our group chat with cat gifs and prayer chains. Silence had become its own kind of weather in our apartment. Steady, calm, and just cold enough to remind me I wasn't missing anything until the phone rang. It was a Monday morning. I'd just finished brewing Darnell's coffee, the smell of hazelnut creamer still clinging to my fingertips, when I saw the hospital's name flash across the screen. "O'Dellon Monroe?" A tired voice asked. "Yes, your father had a stroke. He's stable but unconscious. Your mother gave us your number as the emergency secondary." I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I just said, "I'll be there." Darnell didn't ask for an explanation. He set down his cup, grabbed his keys, and said, "Let's go." The drive was silent. Not the kind that begged to be filled, but the kind where one person breathes for both. He reached for my hand around Silver Spring. I let him hold it. At the hospital, the woman at the front desk asked, "Are you his daughter?" Before I could answer, my mother appeared from behind the curtain of hallway shadows. "No," she said, her voice flat and fast. "She's not family." The nurse blinked, then looked back at me, her gaze lingering. She didn't say anything, but her expression said enough. "I've seen this before." I didn't argue. I nodded politely and stepped back. I never saw him. I sat in the hallway for 20 minutes, listening to the faint beeping behind the ICU doors, then I stood up and left. Not out of anger, not even grief, just clarity. By the following Thursday, I was seated in a downtown law office waiting on the estate mediation that had been postponed twice already, mostly due to Seraphine's delicate condition, as her lawyer phrased it. She hadn't announced a pregnancy until that week. Convenient. The mediator, a lean man in horn-rimmed glasses, opened a folder and cleared his throat. "We've received a sealed letter from the original executor, your grandfather's lawyer." My heart didn't speed up, but I did lean in. He continued, "Per the notarized document and attached deed, the Arizona property was always intended for you, Miss Monroe. It was never to be sold or leveraged by your parents. The mortgage placed in your name is now considered fraudulent." There was a sharp inhale beside me. Seraphine. Her face drained of color. The lawyer turned to me. "You have the right to press charges or simply reclaim ownership." I looked at him, then down at my hands, then back at Seraphine. She shifted in her seat, one hand on her stomach. "Oh, Dylan, I'm pregnant. Please don't drag this into court. I have a family now. I made mistakes, but," I said quietly. She swallowed. "But maybe there's still a way we fix this." I stood. "You're going to be a mother. Then I hope your child has a better mother than I had. And I hope they grow up never needing to unlearn who you were." No one said a word after that, not even the lawyer. I signed the reclamation forms. Clear, final strokes of a pen that had been waiting years to move. Outside the building, dusk was just settling. The sky was a muted lavender. The streetlights blinking on one by one like tired witnesses. Darnell was parked across the street. He didn't get out, just unlocked the passenger side and turned the heater on. I stepped in, closed the door, and rested my hands on my lap. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just reached over and held my hand, firm, warm, like a lighthouse in the fog of everything I'd finally walked away from. And in that stillness, I didn't ache for their apology anymore. I only ached for the years I let them define my worth. Do you think I was too cold? Or maybe just done being the warm body everyone burned to keep themselves comfortable?